Hey everyone. Well, it's still winter time and I'm really looking forward to spring because it means that in these videos I can finally dig into the hive instead of just talk about them outside of them. But we'll get there. Spring is coming. And in the meantime, I want to ask you guys, have you ever made some kind of change in your colony because things didn't look right? Well, of course you did. I mean, that's essentially what we understand as beekeeping. And if you're like me, you know, I'm guilty of this, and most beekeepers, you made those changes without taking these 3 things into consideration, which is probably why you didn't get the results that you were hoping for. By the end of this video, you're going to understand what 3 things I take into consideration before making in-hive manipulations or corrections, trying to make the hive look what I think ideal should look like. So stick around. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Hive Doctor. Today we're going to be going over the 3 things to consider before you make changes to a colony that you think might be off. Why is that important? Well, let's compare it to the Beak Jeep. Let's say I need to take it to the mechanic. The mechanic is going to diagnose what's going on first. And before he just starts ripping parts out and replacing them, he's got to find out what system of the vehicle is ailing and what the root cause is. And until you know the root cause, messing around under the hood is not going to help in any way. You're just going to be guessing and hoping that one of the parts you replace is going to fix the perceived problem. And whether the guy fixes the vehicle or not, either way, I've got to pay, right? I've got to pay whether he fixes it, I've got to pay whether he doesn't fix it. Ideally, he fixes it because that's when it makes it worth it. Well, if we're messing around in a colony, trying to fix brood patterns, the amount of brood, food, nutrition, without taking certain things into consideration first, then we're just stabbing in the dark, guessing and hoping that we are addressing the root issue. When in fact, there may be no issue at all. Now the way this usually unfolds is you get into the hive, you see something that you perceive as wrong, or a lot of times you perceive something as not living up to the standard that you have in mind. And often this is by comparing it to like the colony next door because it's doing great. You're like, why don't these bees look like those bees? They don't have enough brood. Maybe I should give them some more brood. But here's the problem in that. Let's say that this colony has less brood than I would really like it to. So I go to the next colony, I grab some brood because they got plenty, and I share it with them. And I've done this a lot through the years. So what have I just done? Well, normally we look at it as I just boosted their population. But in actuality, what I've done is I just offset the balance. I've given this colony more mouths to feed than resources they may have to do it. So that's just an example of reacting to what I see. Whether it's adding brood, feeding, giving them more space, taking space away, or trying to help, right? And then the next inspection after that becomes even more difficult because they're no longer on their natural trajectory. They're on a course that we manipulated and created through our intervention. Sometimes that's good, but oftentimes it's not in their best interests and it's not in their favor. And the problem is that we end up paying too much attention to the colony instead of letting whatever system they're working out, whatever they're trying to adjust to environmentally, play out on its own. Because remember, we react to snapshots, but colonies are processes in the middle of some kind of motion expressing itself. And once you see this, it really helps to explain why reacting to isolated details often creates more uncertainty later instead of less. And so we get like this snowball of trying to fix stuff and it not making sense, and the snowball just gets bigger and bigger through the season, and we never really have a time to catch up. And before we know it, that momentum of that snowball gets way out of control and way too fast to stop. And of course, like I say, it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. You're just reacting the way that the beekeeping industry has taught us to. But I say that there's a better way. Bees are not static, and they shouldn't all look alike from one another. Yes, they have the potential to, but every one of them has some different stresses and are reacting to environmental circumstances according to those stresses the best they can. And so we've got to treat them differently. And so next time you go into a colony to do an inspection, you're essentially like opening up a book to the middle of the book. Like you missed the beginning and you're not sure what the ending is going to be like. You're only getting what you can read on those 2 pages. And all it does is tell us what this looks like today. So what are the 3 things to take into consideration before changing up your management and before making any big changes inside the colony? Well, the first is recognize what the weather has been doing. Has it been favorable for the bees to get out and forage? If it hasn't, then the internal conditions are going to reflect that. Their brood is not going to be growing and growing because they don't have anything coming in to support the growth. Ideally, it's just remaining steady, but then we've got to realize and recognize that this colony is maintaining itself based on the weather allowing them to get out and forage, if forage is even available, which most of the year it is in some amount. The second thing is rainfall. Have you had enough rainfall for nectar production? And if so, have you had enough days of no rain so that the bees can get out and collect that nectar and bring it home? And so the third factor to consider is there forage available? There's 3 levels of forage availability. One is a dearth. That's fortunately not the majority of the year. The second is the more common one where minor sources of nectar are available. And of course the third is when major sources of nectar are available, which is what we call a honey or nectar flow. When major sources are available, you're going to see the inside of this expand and grow. When minor sources are available, we won't see as much growth as we hope to. And we've got to recognize that and be okay with it and not think that there's something wrong with the hive because they don't have more than 10 frames of brood or 20 frames of honey. That's just the way the colony is. They react to these 3 environmental influences and reflect it really, really well inside the colony. When we stop to recognize what those 3 influences have been like, then we'll be able to be more informed when we make our decisions in the colony, whether we do something or whether we decide that they're fine and that they are rebalancing and reallocating their own resources on their own and they don't need any help from me today. Then you're asking yourself and answering the question, where is my colony headed today? Because when you recognize those past things, you're starting to be able to see where they're going, because that means you've learned how to look at the environmental influences today, because today is going to tell you what tomorrow looks like in the colony. When you start noticing this direction, the direction of your colonies, you start to notice it everywhere. Brood isn't just present or absent, it's expanding, it's holding, or it's contracting, depending on the season as well. Bee population is no longer just strong or weak, it's building pressure or it's easing off. And forage isn't just available or completely gone, it's increasing, peaking, or tapering off. And suddenly, when you see those things, single frames inside the colony stop feeling like an emergency thing to fix. Before you do anything this week or the next in your colonies, look for what's moving, what's currently in motion, not what's missing. That pause, that recognition will do far more for you than any advice from the guy at the club or any checklist that you download on the internet. And if you're someone who wants to learn more about reading the signals before you take action or before you decide that no action is required, check out my website where you can get your own paperback books on signal-based beekeeping. I've got them in ebook form, and I also have 2 coaching offers for you that you can read about and see if it's a good fit. One of them you work with me personally, the other one is pre-recorded, plus you get one of my ebooks, the 3rd volume in my signal-based series, so that you can learn how little things make big differences later in your season. Whether it's in your favor or against, either way, you're going to learn how to take the reins in your beekeeping operation. And of course, you can find these resources in the pinned comment down below, or in the description. I appreciate you guys joining me today. I'll see you in the next video. Hive Doctor out.